All right, so welcome to another deep dive, everybody. And today, we're going to be taking you through a case that is equal parts baffling and tragic.
Mm-hmm.
The disappearance and death of Marbel Ramos.
Yeah, she was 36 years old when she disappeared.
Right.
An Army veteran.
Yep.
And working towards her degree in criminal justice.
Definitely a lot going for it. So what makes this case so compelling, right? Like, what is it that we're really trying to figure out here?
I think it's the central mystery, right? Did Marbel simply vanish, or did something more sinister occur?
Right.
And we're going to be examining evidence from a few different sources. A Crime Junkie podcast episode, an episode of the Dine podcast, which focuses on stories from indigenous communities.
Okay.
And then some news articles to try and get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what we can find. And adding another layer of complexity, we have Marbel's roommate, KC.
Right.
Now, he's the one who reported her missing, but his actions throughout the investigation were, well, let's just say they raised some red flags.
Yeah, they did. Exactly. And understanding his behavior and motivations, I think, is key to unpacking this entire case.
Absolutely. All right, so let's start by setting the scene. It's May 2nd, 2013, and Marbel is last seen dropping off a rent check at her apartment complex around 7:15 p.m. Seems pretty routine.
Pretty normal.
Right,
Yeah.
like nothing out of the ordinary there.
Nothing too crazy.
But just 15 minutes later, things take a pretty dramatic turn, right?
Yeah.
Marbel's boyfriend, Paul, tells investigators that he was on the phone with her,
Okay.
and she actually put him on speakerphone while she was having a heated argument with KC. And you guessed it, about unpaid rent.
Yeah, rent seems to be a recurring theme here.
Yeah, for sure. So we already have some financial tension
yeah.
brewing in the household, and Paul actually chimed in during this call, backing up Marbel,
Oh, wow.
telling KC he needed to move out.
So, like, he got involved in
Yeah.
the argument.
Yes, like
a three-way call.
situation. So now, Casey claims that around 9 p.m. he left for a drive, and when he returned about an hour later, Marbel was gone. And he didn't seem too concerned until the next day when she still hadn't returned.
Okay, so he wasn't immediately like, oh my gosh, where is she?
No. So that's when things start to get really strange, okay? Marbel's sister and some friends, they went to check on her.
Hmm?
And they found her car there and the lights on in her apartment.
Okay.
But no answer at the door. And what's truly bizarre is that Casey was actually there the entire time.
Oh, no.
Sitting in his car outside.
Weird.
He later told police that he didn't want to go inside while they were there, which honestly raises more questions than it answers.
That's super suspicious, yeah.
Right. So it definitely seems odd, to say the least. And once they finally get inside, Marbel is nowhere to be found. Adding to the mystery, her room is unusually messy.
Okay.
Some of her belongings are missing, and they even find a pajama top with bloodstains on the sleeves. A pretty chilling detail, especially when you consider there was a previous 911 call that Marbel made.
Okay.
After a particularly bad argument with KC, where she expressed fear for her safety. She even told the operator she was afraid Casey might hurt her.
Wow.
So, let's recap here, right? We have a missing person, a roommate acting very suspiciously, a history of conflict between them. You might be thinking, okay, this already sounds like a pretty compelling case.
It does.
But wait, there's more. Weeks later, Marbel's body is discovered in a remote location thanks to some very incriminating online searches made by, you guessed it, KC.
Oh, wow.
And those searches shed light on a whole other dimension of this digital footprint we all leave behind.
Oh, that's interesting.
We'll definitely dive deeper into that later on.
Yeah.
But first, to really grasp the complexities of this case, we need to take a closer look at the relationship between Marbel and KC. Because it wasn't always this volatile.
Right.
It wasn't always this bad.
Okay, yeah, I'm curious to know more. So their story began a couple of years before Marbel's disappearance.
So rewind back to a time when things were seemingly less complicated.
Right.
Okay.
Casey had responded to a Craigslist ad that Marbel had posted looking for a roommate.
Oh, the good old days of Craigslist roommate roulette.
Exactly. And in this case, things started off quite well.
Yeah?
They became good friends. They'd walk their dogs together. Marbel even invited KC to family gatherings.
So it sounds like it was more than just your average roommate situation.
It was.
Yeah.
They genuinely seemed to enjoy each other's company.
That's what makes this case even more tragic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, there were signs early on that things might not be as rosy as they appeared.
Okay.
Marbel's sister, Lucero,
Right.
started to notice some red flags.
Such as? Like what kinds of things?
She felt like Casey was a little too attached to Marbel.
Okay.
And remember, Marbel was dating Paul at the time.
Right, even if it was casual.
Right.
Yeah.
And Casey had actually confessed his feelings for Marbel to Lucero.
Oh, wow.
He told her that he knew Marbel wanted to get married and have kids. Right.
And he wanted to be the one to give that to her.
Wow. Talk about unrequited love.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like things started to shift after that.
He did, yeah.
Yeah.
Casey's behavior began to change.
In what ways?
He got a large tiger tattoo. He changed his style.
Okay.
He even had plastic surgery to make himself look younger.
It almost seems like he was trying to mold himself into someone he thought Marbel would be attracted to.
That's a possible interpretation.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
And then, to make matters worse, Casey lost his job.
Oh,
and started having financial problems.
Oh.
And that's when the tension in their living situation really escalated.
Yeah, that's never good when you're living with someone.
Right, exactly. And that brings us back to that explosive argument that Marbel had with Casey a week before she disappeared.
Right.
The one where she called 911.
Right.
I think it's worth revisiting that call in more detail.
I agree, yeah.
Okay.
Analyzing that call, I think, is incredibly revealing.
You can hear the fear in Marbel's voice.
Yeah.
As she tells the operator that she's afraid Casey might hurt her.
Oh, gosh.
She even lied about having a gun just to try and de-escalate the situation.
That's scary.
Yeah.
It's chilling to think about how vulnerable she must have felt in her own home.
For sure.
And this wasn't an isolated incident.
Right.
There's another piece of the puzzle that paints a disturbing picture of Casey's past.
Uh-oh.
A threatening voicemail that he left for his sister.
Oh, my gosh.
This voicemail raises serious concerns about Casey's capacity for violence.
Wow.
Investigators discovered that Casey had a history of volatile behavior.
Okay.
Back when he lived in Tennessee,
Right.
he left a voicemail for his sister, threatening to shoot her in the head and dismember her body.
Oh, my God. Are you serious?
Yeah. And so...
Oh, my gosh. That's terrifying.
I know. And his sister, she's all right, though.
Yes, she survived.
Okay, good.
She reported the threat to the police and even filed a restraining order against Casey.
Oh.
She later described him as a monster to investigators.
So we have a pattern here of escalating conflict, financial desperation,
Right.
and a documented history of violent threats.
That's definitely a troubling combination.
For sure, yeah.
And for investigators,
Yeah.
it was enough to make Casey their prime suspect.
But they still needed concrete evidence, though,
Right.
to connect him to Marbel's disappearance.
Exactly.
They searched his car,
Okay.
but found nothing.
Oh, wow.
The cadaver dog even alerted to the trunk, but that wasn't enough to make an arrest.
So it wasn't enough for probable cause.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So they decided to put him under surveillance,
Okay.
hoping he might lead them to Marbel.
Smart.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what happened next was both unexpected
Okay.
and a testament to the power of technology in modern investigations.
Oh, this is the virtual drive-by?
You're talking about the virtual drive-by?
Yeah.
This is where it gets really fascinating.
Okay.
Casey's own online activity essentially led the police straight to Marbel's body.
Wow. I can't believe that.
I know.
That's crazy.
It is.
Okay.
Casey had been using computers at the public library.
Okay.
And luckily for the investigation, they had a warrant to monitor his online activity.
Oh, so they were watching his every move online.
Every click.
Every search.
Every search.
Wow.
Exactly.
Okay.
They observed him searching things like, does a cell phone have to be turned on to track its location?
Oh my gosh.
And
So
how long does it take a human body to decay?
those are not the kind of searches you make if you're innocent.
It certainly raises some red flags, right?
Yeah.
But the real clincher came when Casey searched for the location of Peters Canyon,
Okay.
the park, where a search party for Marbel was scheduled to take place.
Oh, wow.
And he didn't just look up the park.
Right.
He went into satellite view
Okay.
and zoomed in on a very specific location under a large tree
Wow.
in a remote area.
So a virtual drive-by.
A virtual drive-by,
Yeah.
as one of the investigators put it.
Oh my God.
And sure enough, when police went to that exact spot,
Yeah.
they found Marbel's body.
Wow. It's almost like he wanted to be caught.
I know, right?
Like he was leaving a trail of breadcrumbs,
Yes.
but digital ones.
Exactly.
That's wild.
It does raise questions about his psychological state
Yeah.
and his motivations, right?
Sure.
Like, was it guilt, a desire for attention,
Right.
or perhaps something else entirely? It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah. It's hard to say.
But the discovery of Marbel's body was a major turning point in the
Oh,
case.
yeah, for sure.
It finally gave investigators the evidence they needed to arrest Casey.
Okay.
And when they went to apprehend him, he tried to run.
Oh, no.
He literally jumped out of a window.
Jumped out of a window.
To escape.
Wow, that's a classic sign of a guilty conscience.
Right.
Okay.
But of course, he was quickly caught thanks to the ongoing surveillance.
Right, they were watching him.
They were watching him.
Okay.
So what was Casey's defense at trial?
I'm curious. Did he confess or try to explain away his bizarre behavior?
No. Casey continued to maintain his innocence throughout the trial.
Wow, really?
He never confessed, and he even denied ever searching the area where Marbel's body was found, claiming that he was set up by the police.
Oh, come on.
That's hard to believe, right?
Yeah, with all that evidence.
Given all the evidence presented,
Yeah.
did the defense offer any alternative explanations for Marbel's death?
Okay, what did they say?
They did.
Okay.
Their strategy focused heavily on the lack of a clear cause of death.
Oh, okay.
Remember, Marbel's body was badly decomposed.
Right.
So a definitive determination couldn't be made.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that would make it pretty difficult for the prosecution to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the defense was quick to exploit this ambiguity.
Okay.
They argued that her death could have been the result of an unknown medical condition.
Okay.
Or even suicide.
So they were basically saying,
Right.
hey, we don't know for sure how Marbel died. Right.
So you can't convict Casey of murder.
Exactly. Yeah.
But what about the fact that he disposed of her body?
Right.
Did they address that at all?
They did.
Okay.
Their argument was that even if Casey did dispose of the body, it doesn't necessarily mean he was responsible for her death.
Okay.
He could have found her after she died and panicked,
Oh, okay.
choosing to hide her body instead of calling the police.
A bit of a stretch, don't you think?
It's a little bit of a stretch.
Especially given his history
Right.
and all the other incriminating evidence.
Yeah, it seems like a far reach.
It certainly seemed that way to many.
Yeah.
They even suggested that Casey might have killed Marbel in self-defense,
Oh,
implying it could have been a crime of passion rather than premeditated murder.
interesting.
So what did the jury ultimately decide? Did they buy any of the defense's arguments?
I'm so curious what happened.
Well, after nearly a week of deliberations,
Wow.
the jury found Casey guilty of second-degree murder.
Second-degree murder, okay. Which is a key legal distinction, right?
Right.
Second-degree murder means the killing was intentional,
Okay.
but not premeditated,
Okay.
unlike first-degree murder.
So it seems like maybe the jury believed there was some element of impulsivity or sudden rage involved,
Yeah.
as opposed to a carefully planned out murder.
That's a plausible interpretation.
Yeah.
And it highlights the complex nature of intent and how it's assessed in legal proceedings.
Exactly.
So what happened to Casey after the verdict? Was he remorseful at all?
I hope so.
Not in the slightest.
Really?
He continued to proclaim his innocence,
Oh, wow.
even going so far as to give an interview from prison,
Okay.
where he claimed to have been framed.
No way.
He refused to apologize to Marbel's family,
Oh, that's awful.
stating that he had nothing to apologize for.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
Okay.
He even had the audacity to say that he cared for Marbel more than anyone else in the courtroom.
Oh, that is so insensitive.
It was a cruel and insensitive statement that understandably infuriated Marbel's family,
Yeah.
especially her sister, Lucero.
Right, of course.
So where does Casey stand today?
Yeah, what's he doing now?
He was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison
Okay.
and is currently still incarcerated.
Okay.
He'll be eligible for parole in 2024.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Okay.
That must be incredibly difficult for Marbel's loved ones to process, knowing that the man who took her life could one day walk free.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This case truly underscores the devastating impact of such crimes
Yeah.
on the victims' families.
For sure.
The pain and uncertainty they endure long after the trial is over is unimaginable.
It's really sad.
It also makes you think about the role of circumstantial evidence, right?
Right.
Here we see how digital footprints like those Google searches
Yeah.
can be just as powerful as physical evidence in a criminal investigation.
That's a really good point. That's a key takeaway from this deep dive.
Yeah.
The internet has become an extension of ourselves. And our online actions can have real-world consequences.
For sure.
It makes you think about your own digital footprint, doesn't it?
It definitely does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. It's definitely a case that stays with you. And as we've been discussing, Casey's actions, especially his internet searches, really highlight how our digital lives are increasingly intertwined with real-world investigations.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, Almost a new kind of forensic science is emerging.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like detectives are becoming digital archaeologists in a way.
Exactly.
They're piecing together clues from our online activities, our searches, our emails, our social media posts. It's a whole new frontier in criminal investigations.
And it makes you wonder, if this case happened even 10 years earlier, before the widespread use of smartphones and Google Maps, would they have ever found Marbel's body?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Casey might have gotten away with it, or
Right.
at least the investigation would have been significantly more challenging.
Yeah.
It's a sobering thought, isn't it?
It
Our digital footprints can be both incredibly revealing and incredibly incriminating.
Absolutely. It makes you think twice about every Google search, every website you visit, every message you send.
Right.
It's like Big Brother is watching, but it's not necessarily the government.
Right.
It's the potential for our own digital trails to be used against us.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it raises important ethical questions about privacy and surveillance in the digital age.
For sure.
But let's not lose sight of the human element of this case.
Right.
At the heart of it all
Yeah.
is a young woman, Marbel Ramos,
Right.
whose life was tragically cut short.
Right. And a family left to grapple with the devastating loss of their loved one.
Absolutely.
They're left with unanswered questions, a sense of injustice, and the agonizing knowledge that the man responsible for Marbel's death might one day walk free.
Right.
And that brings us to another crucial aspect of this case, the legal complexities.
Okay.
We see how circumstantial evidence,
Yeah.
while powerful,
Right.
can also be open to interpretation and manipulation.
Yes, exactly.
You mentioned earlier how the defense attorney focused on the lack of a clear cause of death,
Right.
creating that element of reasonable doubt.
Exactly. And that's a legitimate legal strategy.
Right.
It's the prosecution's burden to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
Of course.
And in this case, the lack of physical evidence directly linking KC to the act of killing Marbel
Right.
left some room for alternative explanations.
So even though Casey's behavior was incredibly suspicious, the defense could still argue that maybe, just maybe, there was another explanation for how Marbel died.
Right. Right.
And that's the inherent tension in cases that rely heavily on circumstantial evidence, right?
Yeah.
It's not always a slam dunk. And it requires the jury to weigh the probabilities and make inferences based on the available information.
Exactly.
Which is why it's so fascinating to see how these cases play out in court, right? It's a battle of narratives, with the prosecution trying to weave together a cohesive story of guilt, while the defense tries to poke holes in that story and present alternative possibilities.
Absolutely. And the jury ultimately is the arbiter of truth,
Right.
deciding whose story they find more credible,
Right.
more persuasive.
It's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that the justice system, while striving for fairness, is also inherently human, with all its flaws and imperfections.
That's a profound insight.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the broader implications of this case.
Okay.
It's not just about the tragic death of Marbel Ramos.
Right.
It's about the challenges of navigating a world where digital evidence is increasingly prevalent,
Right.
where legal battles hinge on interpreting complex and often incomplete information,
Yeah.
and where the pursuit of justice is a nuanced and often imperfect process.
So what does this all mean for us, the listeners, as we try to make sense of this case and its implications? What's the takeaway message you want to leave us with?
I think the most important thing is to approach these kinds of stories with a critical eye, questioning our assumptions, acknowledging the limitations of our knowledge, and recognizing that the pursuit of truth is an ongoing process. We may never know for sure what happened to Marbel Ramos.
Right.
But by engaging with the evidence, considering multiple perspectives, and wrestling with the ethical and legal dilemmas, we can gain a deeper understanding of the complexities of the world around us.
And perhaps, more importantly, we can develop a greater sense of empathy for the victims of crime, their families, and all those affected by the often unpredictable and messy nature of justice.
For sure.
This deep dive has certainly given me a lot to think about, and I hope it's done the same for you.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks for joining us.